welcome to Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench. I'm Bob Lettenberger, Mr. Bob, Education Director at the National Railroad Museum. This is Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, where we talk about math, science, history, and of course trains. And every now and then we go on a tour of the National Railroad Museum. Hey, if you're watching us live and would like to type in and tell us who you are and where you are watching from, feel free to do so. Also, if you have questions, type those in and we'll answer questions after the segment. And of course, if you like our segment today, make sure you share it with your friends. One of the things that we get asked so often at the museum, especially when looking at the Union Pacific Big Boy, is what are all those bumps that we're looking at? Come on along, let me show you. Normally, when you see a big boy locomotive, you don't see any lumps or bumps along the boiler. It looks pretty sleek and clean for a freight locomotive. And in fact, when you even look at our model big boy, you don't see any lumps or bumps anywhere along the way on that boiler as well. But when you visit the National Railroad Museum and you look at our big boy locomotive, number 4017, you see rows and rows of what appear to be bumps along the back part of the boiler near the cab. Well, those are stay bolts. Let's explain what they are. You're looking at the cutaway of a steam locomotive boiler. The area that contains water all around the firebox is actually under pressure. The big boy, for example, runs at a boiler pressure of 300 pounds per square inch, 300 psi. And that water surrounds the boiler on all sides, and it's under pressure, pushing in on the firebox. Inside the firebox, of course, well, we have a bed of coal that is burning. And in the big boy, that temperature can get up to around 2,000 degrees. That temperature is hot enough to melt the metal that the firebox is made out of. So, in order to keep everything in check, to allow the boiler to run under pressure, to allow the proper heat in the firebox, we have stay bolts. And as you'll notice, the stay bolts are what is holding the firebox in place. If they weren't there, the firebox would either melt or collapse from the heat or the pressure. So then the question becomes, why can we see the stay bolts when we look at the big boy or any other locomotive at the National Railroad Museum? Well, on the outside of the boiler, there would normally be a boiler jacket, a sleek cover, and under that would be something called asbestos lagging. Now, in the museum environment, asbestos lagging is not necessarily a good thing to have on your steam locomotives. When it gets wet, it turns into a mush, kind of like oatmeal. So a number of years ago at the National Railroad Museum, the boiler jackets came off of our steam locomotives and the asbestos was mitigated. It took care of the asbestos problem, plus it preserved our locomotives because that asbestos lagging acts just like a sponge up against the boiler vessel, which would have caused it to rust out and permanently damage the locomotives in our collection. So with the boiler jackets gone, the asbestos gone, you can see all those lumps and bumps or the ends of the stay bolts. Now, if you take a look at the blueprints, the drawings for building the big boy, and the one in particular that details the stay bolts, this is actually the plan view of what you are seeing when you visit the National Railroad Museum and look at our big boy. And as you can see, the array of stay bolts is incredibly extensive to hold that massive firebox that the big boy has in place when it was in operation. The big boy's firebox is all of about 19 feet long. It's about 10.5 feet wide, and in places it is between 6 and 7 feet tall on the inside. So there you go, stay bolts, and why you see them on our locomotives at the National Railroad Museum, and the fact that every steam locomotive actually does have them to hold their firebox in place. You know, at the National Railroad Museum, it's our mission to inspire lifelong learning by by providing dynamic education opportunities through the preservation of railroad objects, engaging exhibits, and innovative programs. As a nonprofit organization, we are supported through public and private donations and by our members. For more information on how you can help support the National Railroad Museum, or to learn more about becoming a museum member, visit our museum website, nationalrrmuseum.org. I'm Bob Watzenberger, Mr. Bob. Thank you for joining me at Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench. We'll see you again real soon.